the third year and counting, Richard Skipper has been celebrating the artists you love.
And what are some of the things that you've really
run out of time, and we've got to talk about your latest.
I want to go back a little bit, first of all, and celebrate a true legend.
Richard Skipper is all about celebrating life, art, and his guest body of work.
And did you pursue performing opportunities while you were in high school?
Please join us while he showcases these diverse and talented individuals. Here's Richard Skipper.
Happy Wednesday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. For those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. My show is about celebrating life, celebrating art, celebrating artists, celebrating whatever it is that we can find to celebrate in these crazy, crazy times. And how exciting are we today to have Lennie Watts joining us right here. He just recently had a birthday, and he's fresh from Walt Disney World, where you celebrate. How many years have you been going to celebrate your birthday at Walt Disney World?
Well, I think the first time I went with a bunch of people was when I turned 38. That was the first time I went for my birthday. We missed, obviously, the last couple of years, but you could do the math on that one. And I just turned 60. So we celebrated my 60th birthday there. So
I'm right behind you.
Yeah, well, it ain't all it's cracked up to be.
Oh, welcome to the 60s.
Yeah, definitely.
So this month, believe it or not, is, you may already know this, Lennie, but this is Adopt a Rescue Bird Month. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
See the things that you will learn here at Richard Skipper Celebrates.
Yeah.
And it is also National Lennie Watts Day. Whether you know him from Singnasium or as the president of MAC or as an award-winning actor, 17 MAC Awards. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Who's counting?
I am. 17.
But anyway, I'm thrilled you're here. And we've done stock together. We've traveled together. I want to ask you, before we start, because the show is all about celebrating, what are you celebrating right now besides your birthday?
I don't know. I'm just celebrating being able to figure out how to live my life, under these crazy times and be able to, not be held prisoner to what's going on and be able to take care of myself and be able to, get out there and do what I have to do. And, I'm always celebrating singers and artists with Singnasium. We've kept that going, but, I'm celebrating just being able to fight through all of this craziness and enjoy my life a little bit.
That's great. I want to let everyone know that if you put the hashtag Lennie Watts in the comment section, not only will you win a copy of Lennie's CD, which you're going to hold up for us.
Oh, yes. It's a CD.
Yes, which I have. And there's actually a song on there called Celebrate Me Home. Talking about celebration. I love that CD. And we're also going to be giving away a copy of A Dinosaur Named Harry, which is an incredible children's book. And I'm sure there's a little bit of child in all of us. But before we begin, someone sent me over the holidays a gift called Be Best. And there are these random questions. They are considered icebreaker questions. So I'm pulling a random question. I have not even looked at it. To kick us off today. And the question is, what were the 3 biggest turning points in your life? And that's a good way to start today.
The 3 biggest turning points. Okay, the first one is I've always struggled with my weight growing up. And in my senior year of high school, I weighed over 300 pounds and I lost 100 pounds throughout my senior year of high school. And when I went to college, I was able to start fresh and my whole life changed. I didn't change. I was the same person, just a little smaller. But how I saw myself in the world changed. on that year when I lost that weight and was able to go into a new school with new people and a new surrounding and be able to kind of reinvent myself. That was a big one. That's when I started doing theater and really started singing and putting myself out there, was that year. The second thing was when I moved to New York. I had never been here. I never visited. I only knew what was on All in the Family and the Jeffersons. That's what I knew about New York.
And
but a friend of mine,
what year was that?
1985.
Okay.
And before you were born. And a friend of mine was here going to AMDA. And she called me and she said, "You've got to move to New York and go to AMDA. It's just like the movie Fame." And so I literally made the decision. I packed everything I owned into 11 suitcases. I sold my car. I quit my job and I moved to New York. And then I auditioned for the school. Like I hadn't even had that. Like now I can't even decide where I want to go for dinner. And this was like deciding to move all the way across the country, having never been here. I only knew 3 people that lived in New York. And that was a big thing. And obviously I've been here ever since. And I think another big one for me was when I first started working at Theater by the Sea. Mm-hmm. That opened up a lot of doors for me and gave me a really great life for 10 years. And it allowed me to perform. It allowed me to direct. They produced the CD that I have, and we did the big concert there and stuff. So that was a huge huge turning point for me.
So let's go back a little bit. You are originally from St. Louis, Missouri. Am I correct?
You are correct.
It is St. Louis.
It is St. Louis. It is not St. Louis.
Thank you. So you grew up in St. Louis, and I asked for a photograph of you as a 5-year-old. Here, this is. Are you actually 5 in this picture?
No, I think I'm a little younger, but I didn't have anything at 5. It was either this one or then I jumped to like 10 or 12. I have some pictures from like Halloween. But I also liked what I was wearing. So I'm like, that's what I'm sending him.
That's a great picture. Well, the reason I ask for a 5-year-old picture, and those who have seen the show know that I ask about this, because to me, the 5-year-old self is the purest self. It's before school starts. It's before you start becoming what your friends want you to be and what teachers say that you should be or what you shouldn't be. And I want to know a little bit about the 5-year-old Lennie Watts that was growing up in St. Louis, Missouri.
Well, I'll tell you this. I'm the youngest of 5. And we range from my oldest sister is 74. And then I just turned 60. So it's a large range. And so I grew up in a big family, but also kind of like an only child in a way, because there was a big age difference. My brother was in Vietnam. And so he wasn't there. And so there was a huge gap in the age between me and my next sibling. But my next door neighbor, who I grew up, she was there my whole life, told me when I got older that for the longest time she thought my name was Lennie Shut Up, because that's all she ever heard coming.
Lennie Shut Up!
Coming from the next door. So if that tells you anything about, I think I was very creative. I learned how to entertain myself because I didn't have, like I said, I had my siblings, but they were much older. And at that point, they didn't want to have anything to do with me. They were in their teen, they were already young preteens or young teen. They didn't want to have that. So I was always very creative. I always had to, I didn't have a problem being alone or entertaining myself with my toys. I started directing and doing things at home when I was young. Like I would listen to albums and then put songs from each album together to make a new show. I was, so I think that's what it was. I had a great childhood. We had a nice backyard and we had dogs and it was suburbia and it was not a bad childhood. And, my dad owned restaurants and, we weren't rich, but we didn't want for things. And I think I grew up in a pretty happy situation, except for being told to shut up all the time. And now you can't stop me. So that's what I'm making up for lost time.
Well, good for you. Now, both of us are the same age, give or take a few weeks. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a television household. Did you as well?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, my grandmother, my mom's mother, lived with us. That she moved in with my parents right after they got married, and so I didn't realize that everybody's grandmother didn't live with them. And she had her set of television. You know, she loved Hawaii Five-0 and Mannix, and so I was always watching that stuff with her. But my big ones were the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family and those variety shows that do not exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that will explain who I am today, that I grew up watching, Shields and Yarnell and Cher and Carol Burnett. And I remember we had this little Sony television, this little tiny TV, and I would sneak it into my room when I would go to bed and watch Johnny Carson. Yes. Under my covers, which is why I knew Marilyn May when she popped up in my life later. I knew who she was from watching Johnny Carson. So, yeah, I don't know that the rest of my family was so television, but I certainly was.
Now, did you grow up with a great arts and education program in your school, or where did you first start gravitating towards that beyond, the shows that you were putting on in your own backyard or in your own home?
You know what, Richard? That was it. I mean, we had music class. We sang. I played Santa Claus, in first grade when they did the Christmas show. We always had singing and music class. I would not say when I grew up that we had a huge arts situation in grade school. In high school, there was choir, concert choir. There was a lot of music. They used to do what they called the operetta every year. I went to a school called Southwest High School, and the operetta, literally everyone in school was involved in this show in some manner. Mm-hmm. So I did that, but I would audition and I would never get cast. I was painfully shy when it came to singing and doing that. And I was painfully self-conscious about my size. And so I never put myself out for any of that, but I knew I knew that this is what I was supposed to do. There was never a doubt in my mind. It just wasn't manifesting outside of my bedroom, so to speak, until I got to college, and then everything kind of really opened up and changed for me.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you knew 3 people in New York, but was there that thought before that you were going to come to New York?
Not really. I don't think so. I mean, at that point I was doing like community theater in St. Louis, and I was having a lot of fun, and no, it was a real snap decision. I never dreamed, I always wanted to be on stage, but I never thought about the concept of moving across the country to New York. I just thought it was all going to happen for me in St. Louis, and I would do this. I was managing a shoe store. I sold shoes, and I worked for Florsheim, Thayer McNeil. And when I went to my general manager to tell her I was leaving, she was about to give me my own store. And so had I stayed, I probably would, I would have had a very different life, but I probably would have done a lot of community theater. And now St. Louis has a lot of theater and cabaret and arts going on. That wasn't necessarily the case when I was there, but no, I never dreamed of like, I have to move to New York. I had a friend, my friend Freddie Walker, who was in the original company of Rent. She played Joanna in Rent, and we went to high school together. And she, like the second she took her graduation gown off, she knew she was going to New York, and that's where she went. Mm-hmm. Mine was not that way. I was happy with my life, and I had great friends, and we were singing, and we were being asked to sing at people's private parties and do stuff like that. I never even thought of it until my other friend Christine said to me, "You've got to come." And then I guess that just flipped a switch in my head, and I was like, all right, I'm going.
And what was the general consensus? I was lucky enough to meet your parents. They saw us when we were both performing at Theater by the Sea.
That's right.
But when was the deciding moment? And what was that like for your family when you said, I'm off, I'm going to New York, I'm going to see what I can do there?
Well, it wasn't great right away. I think because it was so sudden. My mom, as you may remember and know, was a big band singer. My mom sang, and that's how my dad met her. She was singing in a hotel in St. Louis, and he went up to her, and after he had come back, he was a prisoner of war in World War II, and he was involved in entertainment. He won medals for entertaining, for morale and entertainment while they were captured in Japan. And so it's kind of been in our blood, but it was never looked at as a viable occupation, or anything like that. But then, when I moved to New York, my mom I still have the card that my mom wrote to me about, making this move. I still have it, about not doubting myself, and that they believe in me, and that they, it just was a weird decision, and it came out of nowhere. And, but then when they retired, when I did the national tour of Music Man and the Wizard of Oz, they would follow me around on tour, and they would just pop up in different states and just be there. And I remember one year on my birthday, we were in Florida, and they showed up with a homemade red velvet cake and had tickets to see the show, so they really got on board. And then my mom, before she passed, she was in an assisted living thing, and she had a walker, and inside of her little seat of the walker was my CD and my reviews and the cabaret scenes that had my picture on the front that she just carried around with her in the walker. So they were very supportive once they saw that it was a real thing. But I guess because I had never talked about it, never said, my dream is to move to New York, this is what I'm going to do, I think it just kind of came out of left field. And I had a great job, and I just bought a new car, and they were like, what are you doing? So yeah, it was a bit of a surprise, but they got used to it. They came to visit a couple of times, and they came when I graduated from AMDA, and they were, so yeah, they were supportive. My family's very supportive too. My siblings, they love when I come to St. Louis and am able to perform and do stuff. They've always been there to see me when I did my stuff, even when it wasn't so great, back in the day.
Well, that's wonderful. But no, when you made that decision to come to New York, do you think it was one of those decisions that if you had not done it at that moment, that you probably never would have?
Yes, most definitely. Yeah, I think it was one of those. And that's the way this has been true in my life, just in general. Mm-hmm. Like if things happen, I make this decision, and then it happens. And I feel like if I don't, and then things that I've kind of waffled on end up kind of never, there was a time when I thought I might want to move to the West Coast. And had I just done it, that would have happened, but I waffled on it, and now I'm like, it's too late. I'm not going to go. It's too much, but yeah, I think had I not just picked up and done that, yeah, I'm kind of an all or nothing kind of guy, so had I not just decided I was going to pack everything, and I didn't just move up here with a couple of suitcases to see how it went. Mm-hmm. I literally, this was in the day when you didn't have to pay for suitcases. I had 11 suitcases and 3 big boxes. And when I got here, one of my sisters flew up with me, and I had to remember those old big taxis, the big brown ones? Oh, yeah. I had to get one of those, and we filled the whole back seat with all of my stuff. So it wasn't like I did it half, it was all or nothing. It was like, I'm bringing everything. I brought shit up here that I didn't even need, stuff like, did I really need to bring all my high school yearbooks? But I brought everything. I'm like,
brought everything. You were determined.
Yeah, this is it.
When you got here, was it an easy transition for you to acclimate yourself in New York?
Part of it was, and part of it was difficult. Like just being on my own was hard, and that might have been hard anywhere I ended up going. I kind of liked New York right away, and I moved here in the 80s when it wasn't, it was a little seedy. And so it was not a difficult transition. It was just trying to figure things out. I loved being able to walk around and see. I was like, oh my God, what is this? What is this? We didn't have that in St. Louis, and you didn't walk anywhere in St. Louis. You got in a car and you went to where you got, mm-hmm. So to walk around and see all the things that were happening, and, and to turn on the TV and see the Robin Bird show. I was like, what? Robin, I mean, what is, it's like so many things when you move here. That's like, what is this?
Manhattan Access Television.
Yeah, do you remember that? I mean, it was like crazy, so, and then I had those 3 friends that one of them I moved in with, my friend Freddie, I moved in with, and my friend Kent was here. My friend Christine, was going to AMDA. So, but when I got here, I got really sick. I had been here for not very long, and I started having these terrible, terrible pains. And I went to the emergency room, and they just sent me home and just said, it's gas, whatever. And I'm like, look, I grew up fat. I know what gas is and what gas ain't. And this ain't gas. And they were like, well, there's one test we can give you that we haven't given you. And I said, well, I want it. And they did it. And they were like, oh no. And they thought that my gallbladder had separated and moved away, but it had folded over from the gallstones exploding.
Oh,
And the doctor said, if you do not get this gallbladder taken out immediately, it's going to explode and you're going to bleed internally and die. So I'd only been here for a few months, and I got on the phone with my parents, and they're like, fly me home. And they flew me back to St. Louis, and I had the surgery and recuperated there and then came back. So, so that kind of stuff was going on, but I don't know. I liked New York a lot when I first moved here, but I think it was also just about being on my own and doing my own thing for the first time kind of ever, you know?
Now, when you went to AMDA, and I don't know if the rules are the same or if but were you allowed to audition for things while you were at AMDA?
No, we just went to AMDA, and I don't know that I would have. I think we did towards the end. I remember going to some big cattle call at that big studio that was on Broadway, in the Minskoff Studios.
Yes.
I remember going to some big cattle call for a tour and being typed out, and I think that was towards the end of my time at AMDA. You know, but you know, just a little thing about AMDA. At the end of my 2 years at AMDA, I had a talk with the head of AMDA, and he brought me into his office and basically told me that I was never going to make it in musical theater, that I was not good looking enough to be an ingenue, but not charactery enough to be a character actor. And he suggested that I watch Charles Laughton movies. But that was my kind of go out into the world and conquer them speech that I got from the head of AMDA. And so a lot of this stuff, that's always been in the back of my head when I'm doing things. But that was how I was kind of sent into the world.
Now, once you left AMDA and you started to audition, did you really know the ropes of what to do as far as auditions are concerned? I mean, we learned we come to New York, we get Backstage. Show business was still in existence when I came here.
Yeah.
So when did you first start auditioning, really going after it? And did you listen to that guy who said, you know, these limitations that were being placed on you?
Listen, as you know, it's when you kind of have doubts about yourself and then somebody says something like that, it fortifies the doubts that you have in your mind to begin with. And so I would be lying if I said that that wasn't always there. Sometimes I used it as a positive thing, like, you know, screw this guy, I'm going to go out and do this. And sometimes it was like, well, he's right. You know, that's kind of how I felt anyway in certain areas. So I did not, what happened was right after I graduated from AMDA, the Spirit of New York came into the city, that cruise boat. And that had singing waiters, and a bunch of us auditioned for that. And then I did get hired on that, and I kind of stayed there. I stayed there for like 6 years and ended up becoming the entertainment director and hiring the new staff and training the new staff. And I sang on the click tracks, and so I had kind of a, you know, I get into a place and I stay there. You know, I did Theater by the Sea for like 10 years. I did The Boat for like 6 years. I think that's part of my Midwestern work ethic. You know, it's like, as opposed to a normal actor that just pops from one gig to the next. That's hard for me. I didn't do a lot of auditioning at the beginning.
How did Theater by the Sea happen for you?
Well, it's a funny story. I was working at Don't Tell Mama, and I was singing in the piano bar, and I sang a song, and this guy called me over to his table and said, "Do you do musical theater?" And I said, "I do, actually." And he said, "I'm directing a production of Music Man at Theater by the Sea, and I don't have a Marcellus. Would you be able to come to the audition tomorrow?" And I said, "Sure." And it was Richard Sabellico. And
I think it's watching, by the way.
Oh, really? Yeah. And so what happened was I said yes, because what else are you going to say? And I said, "Sure." And he gave me the information, but I had to work on the Spirit that day. So I'm just like, screw it. Here goes another opportunity out the window. But so I went to work on the Spirit, and by luck, my entire section did not show up for the cruise because their bus broke down.
Oh my God.
And so just as the ship was getting ready to leave, I said to the manager, I'm like, "Can I leave?" And she was like, "Go ahead." And I jumped off the ship and went to the audition. And I got and he cast me as Marcellus. And then that started my time at Theater by the Sea. And I also did the national tour of Music Man that he directed. And then I also did The Wizard of Oz, which was produced by the Theater by the Sea team as well. And that's how my whole time. What's that?
That took you to Korea and around the world, didn't it?
That took me all around the country. I've been to every one of our 50 states because of the touring, and Canada and Mexico, and then we went to Korea with The Wizard of Oz. But that's how the whole thing started. Was I was working a piano bar shift, and he heard me and thought that I, was the right type for that role. So, I mean, that's why I teach at Marymount, Manhattan now, college. And I always tell them, it's like, get out there and sing. You never know what's going to happen. You never, ever know what's going to happen. And that's how it all started. And then because I got in with Theater by the Sea and they liked me, thank God, I never really had to audition. Like it was always like, oh, you can come and be in this show. I would have to audition for parts sometimes, but it was always a given. And so I didn't have to audition for 10 years.
Now, was Music Man the show that you got your equity card with?
No, I got my equity card with Yeston and Kopit's Phantom, but that was also a Theater by the Sea. And then we took it to some place in Westchester. I can't remember another theater, but that's where I got my
Westchester Dinner Theater, which just closed because of COVID.
Yeah, it wasn't that. It was in another theater that's also not there, but we did it there. It was in the Carvel Center. The Carvel Ice Cream Center is where it was, up in upstate New York somewhere. But that's how I got my equity card, was through Phantom.
Now, because I know this story, and I want you to share this story, because it's one of my favorite stories, you did a production of The Wizard of Oz that was narrated, if I remember correctly, by Godzilla.
No, a grasshopper.
A grasshopper.
You get close. It's close.
Close. A grasshopper. But there was a funny story about the guy who played the grasshopper in terms of translation to another language. Do you mind sharing that story?
Well, I'll give the short story because I don't want this to be the whole thing. So when we went to when we went to Korea to do The Wizard of Oz, they took half American cast and half Korean cast, and they beefed up the chorus with the Korean cast, and then they added a narrator because I guess, obviously The Wizard of Oz is not as huge in other countries as it is here. So they had a narrator who would kind of, let the little kids know what was going on. And they decided, for some odd reason, to make the narrator a grasshopper. And so the person who was playing the grasshopper was an ex-sumo wrestler turned children's television star who now owns a Korean barbecue in downtown Manhattan.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm serious. And Karen Mack, a couple of years ago, gave me a gift card to go there for dinner that I haven't gotten to use yet because of COVID. So, but anyway, he would come on this little tri-state. He was all in green, and he had a crash helmet with antenna, and he had swim fins. It's like I always tell people, like you remember from the 1939 classic starring Judy Garland. And he would ride on this little red tricycle. And he would just come out whenever he felt like he wanted to come out. There was no rhyme or reason. And when he would come out and want to talk, they would just turn our microphones off, turn his up, and then we would have to sit there and go like, oh, and stuff. And so he came out one night, and we had just danced the jitterbug with the big trees and the whole thing. And he came out on this tricycle with a little bucket. And we were like, oh, what's going to happen now? And he stood behind Dorothy, and he said, Dorothy make a poo-poo? No. And then he did the Tin Man, and then he did the Scarecrow, and then he comes behind me, and he says, Lion make a poo-poo. And he reached into the bucket and threw Snickers bars at the children in the audience. Also, you may remember that from the 1939 classic starring Judy Garland.
Well, of course.
But he also took a little shine to me. And he wanted to sumo wrestle me at the end of the show. And the producer called me up and he said, look, the grasshopper wants to sumo wrestle you. And I said, I will only do it if I can win every night. I'm not going to get thrown around by this clown. And so he agreed to that, which I didn't think he would. But then one time we were in the locker room together, the dressing room, which was a locker room at the time, but it was the dressing room. And he came over to me and he was like all sweaty, just taking off his grasshopper thing, and he was like, Lion. do you think I'm sexy? And I was like, no. And then he said, Lion, I am lesbian. And that was my
story.
Yeah, it's a classic story, and I wish that I was making some of it up, but it's all true. And he was, I guess, telling me that he was a lesbian and wanted to know if I thought he was sexy. Looking back on it, that he would come to work. He was driven to work in a Bentley, and now he owns this restaurant. I might have made a different life choice.
Maybe so. Now, but getting back to New York, you said that when you got this audition for Theater by the Sea, you were already working at Don't Tell Mama. Mm-hmm. So when, where, and how did you find out about the world of cabaret, or was it the Spirit of New York that really got you there?
No, my first cabaret venture was in a show called Ain't Missin' Dinner that this guy Tom Andalora and Paul Sportelli wrote, and it was a takeoff of like a Weight Watchers meeting. And that's where I met Randy Lester. And this guy, Donald Byerly, was directing it. And I knew him from the ship. And he said, I think you'd be great for this part. And the best part was it was a guy who had already lost a lot of weight. I didn't have to play one of the fat roles. I was playing a role of somebody who had lost a lot of weight and was still going back to the meetings. Mm-hmm. So I did this show, and it was at the old duplex that then became 55 Grove Street. And it was me and Randy, and Donald directed it. And that was my first kind of initiation to cabaret. And then when I met Randy, because, Randy's been working in the clubs since the Eisenhower administration. And so she was also working at Don't Tell Mama. And she said, you should come see this show. I think you would like it. And it was Terry Lynn Paul.
Wow.
And she was doing a show with a band and backup singers and singing kind of pop music, which is what I like to sing. And so I went to see it, and I was like, oh my God, I can do a show. I can put a show together like this with the band, and it doesn't have to be Cole Porter, and it doesn't have to be American Songbook. Like, I can sing what I want to sing. And because, I've been cast as Nicely and Pseudolus. That's not how I necessarily portray myself. So that like blew my mind. And so then from there, she would let me sit in the back sometimes for shows if there was seats. And then I got a job there. Ming, of course, you remember Ming, the Fong family. Yes. Ming hired me, and I started working I started as a seater, in the back room. My first show that I ever worked was Rainey Cole as Patsy Cline.
Oh, wow.
That they used to wrap around the block to come into, and I would work that show with Phyllis Pastori and Nancy Timpanaro every Saturday, and
those were the days.
What's that? Those were the days. Those were the days. And smoking, they were smoking in the back room. I remember going home smelling like an ashtray because you had to keep cleaning the ashtrays. But there was something really magical and cool about it. And that's when I started to think, well, I would like to create my own show, just like I did when I was 5 in my bedroom. So that's how I started doing it. And then one girl, this friend of a friend, came to see my show, and she's like, oh my God, I've never seen anybody do this. Because, I had a band and backup singers and stuff. And she was like, would you direct my show? And I directed her show for free because I didn't know anything about it. And that's how my directing and teaching all started, was just because somebody saw what I did and liked it. And that's how that's how the whole cabaret thing really started. So I blame Randy Lester.
Well, I admire the fact that you're asked to do this, and you did it without charging her because you had never done it before. But it gave you a chance, to get your name out there as a director. But the first room that you became the booking manager for, was that Rose's turn?
That was Mama Rose's.
Mama Rose's.
Which was owned by the Pham family, who owned Don't Tell Mama and Rose's Turn. And it was on 14th and 2nd.
So we've seen this business go through a lot of ups and downs. You and I both have seen a lot of that. What are some of the things that you really like a lot about changes that are currently in place in the cabaret world? And what are some of the things that you truly miss from those days when you were first getting started?
Well, I think what I like about it is that when I first started doing cabaret, and you might agree or disagree with this, it was very elitist. I felt it was very elitist. Mac was very elitist. It wasn't just like for anybody. What I like about it now is that, and one of the things I tried to accomplish when I was the president of MAC for 11 years was to try to open it up to people that anybody, could do it, because I have always said the best and worst thing about cabaret is that anybody can do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's terrific that anybody can do it, and it's horrible that anybody can do it. But that's what I like about it now, is that I feel like there's younger people, and I teach a cabaret class at Marymount. That's the class that I teach. And these young people are coming in, and I always ask them, why do you want to take a cabaret class? That's not going to lead you to a career. And they're like, because we don't know who we are. And we want to be able to sing the songs that we want to sing as ourselves. And we don't really know that because we've been this musical theater training. And so that's what I like about cabaret now, is that I feel like it's the parameters have gotten big. It's not so straight and narrow about, if you're not singing the Great American Songbook, you're never going to be looked at, and I feel like I was one of the people that kind of broke that barrier for a little bit, because of the way, me, Lena Katrakis, Patrick DeGennaro, Bobby Belfry, there was a time when they didn't have a category for us. And so they invented this pop R&B category, because they didn't even want to put us in with male vocalists, me and Patrick and Bobby Belfry, because we sang pop music. So they didn't know what to do with this. And so they made a whole category. And now whatever you do in the cabaret room, if you're telling stories and being intimate, is considered cabaret. And I love that people can get up and sing from their heart, whatever that happens to be, and still be a part of this community. What I miss are some of those old school cabaret shows. And every once in a while I'll see one and like, oh my God, this takes me back to the day. It's like structured in such an old school way. There's not heavily themed. It's just somebody, up there just doing their thing. And I miss that. I miss people. It's starting to happen again now, but there was a time where people just stopped taking risks, and everybody was just playing it safe and just getting up, and it was boring to me. And now I think people are starting to take risks a little bit more, and they're starting to think outside of the box a little bit more, which is what I remember from the 80s and early 90s, seeing some of those shows at the back. And I worked in the back room at Don't Tell Mama for like 15 years on and off. And I saw the good, the bad, and the ugly.
You paid your dues.
I paid my dues, man, but I learned a lot watching those shows in the back room.
Well, I want to break this down into different sections. First of all, let's go back to the fact when you were doing Theater by the Sea, you had the luxury of going away for the summer, doing these shows, and then coming back on the off months from the summer and working in the piano bars. And was it an easy transition for you to go back and forth between cabaret and theater?
At that time, it wasn't a bad thing, because I had just, I was still in the theater head. I think now, when I just did my last show, when I did Santaland Diaries and Drowsy Chaperone, luckily those shows were kind of like me personality. But when I went back into the thing, I'm like, oh my God, I have to remember how to do this kind of thing. But back then it was fine, because it was all still kind of fresh. And, I don't know how the piano bars and things are now, but you could be gone when I was there, you could be gone for a year and still get your shifts back when you came back if you wanted them. And so that was a great thing to be able to know that I could go off for my summer and do my thing, and then come back and know that I have a job and don't have to search for a job or anything like that. And I also hosted, as you know, because you were there when I was there, I've seen Richard Skipper in a half slip and a brassiere at Theater by the Sea.
And you've got the pictures to blackmail.
And I have the picture to prove it. I have to find that. But I also hosted the late night cabaret at Theater by the Sea every night, and which was very much just me being me and introducing all the other singers and being funny and telling stories and doing all that stuff. So I kind of kept one foot in each side for that whole time.
So when you started booking the rooms, let's first of all talk about misconceptions. What do you think the biggest misconception is for people about MAC? What MAC is, what MAC isn't, what MAC should be, what MAC should not be? Take it away.
Oh, okay. I think one of the biggest things that came up for me over the last year and a half is people thinking that MAC and cabaret are synonymous, and they are not. Not everything that happens in cabaret has anything to do with Mac. And not everything that Mac does has everything to do with all aspects of cabaret. Mac is just like a trade organization of like-minded artists but Mac does not dictate what happens in the whole of the cabaret world. And I think a lot of people were confused about that. Mm-hmm. And when Mac would do something, they would be like, well, this is not this, and this is not, it's not whatever. And it's like, but this is Mac. This is not cabaret. Or things would happen just in the cabaret world and everybody would blame Mac. And it's like, Mac has nothing to do with this. And they're like, well, that's how I see it. And it's like, well, but I look in the mirror and see Ricky Martin. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. You can see whatever you want. But the fact is that Mac is an organization that people pay dues to join. And we're not cabaret. It's an association of like-minded artists that do that. So that's, I think, the biggest misconception. The other one is the age-old one that you've heard a million times about how can Mac fill my audience? How can Mac get my audience? What can Mac do to help this? What can Mac do to help? Why don't I have health insurance through Mac? There's that kind of silly stuff that people just don't understand.
Well, it's interesting. Throughout this conversation tonight, you've talked about all these different areas that you have been a part of. You truly are the poster child for someone who's paid their dues along the way. And you've worked in various realms of this. A few years ago, when I was doing PR, someone who well-known in the cabaret world, I asked when she hired me to be her publicist, what her goals were. And the first thing she said was to win a Mac Award. And I said, well, you have to start at square one and work towards that. It took me years before I got that first nomination.
Yep. Yeah, me too. It took forever and ever and ever. And the first person that ever took me seriously was Jamie DeRoy.
Yes.
And I worked in the back room and nobody in the... okay, this doesn't include everybody, but most people who were in that cabaret Mac at the time they wanted nothing to do with the bartender in the back. They had no idea. Jamie heard me sing once, or Sydney, I think, said, oh, if you're doing Jamie DeRoy and Friends, which she was doing at Mama's, she goes, you might want to ask Lennie because he sings. Oh, really? She asked me, and then the rest was history. And then all of a sudden, some of these people started to being a little nicer to me in the cabaret room because all of a sudden it happened to be on the Spirit of New York. I would have these horrible customers, and then I would get up and sing, and they would say, well, if we knew you could sing, we would have been nicer to you. And it was like, well, you should have been nicer to me anyway. It doesn't matter if I sing or not.
But I want to break down the same question that I just asked you in various parts because you also have been a booking manager.
Yes.
And you've worked in several clubs as a booking manager.
3.
Well, that's several to me.
Yeah, 3.
So again, what are the misconceptions that people have about what your job was as a booking manager?
Oh my God, Richard, it's a job that I will never do again. I would never do that again. My hats are off to people like Sydney who have made a career out of it. It was extremely difficult. And as the clubs on paper got better, the job got worse.
And why is that?
Well, we started at Mama Rose and it was great. And it was just like a fun, club, and we were running it and it was great. Then supposedly the next one, which was called the Encore, which was on 47th, was supposed to be a step up. And then that got extremely difficult. And then the Metropolitan Room was like, the worst 3-4 years of my life. However many years I did it, it feels like 100. But on paper, they were all getting better. But then my job got worse as it went along. A couple of the misconceptions, I think, look, I'm an artist myself, so I'm not like throwing stones at people, but we tend to forget that anybody else exists on occasion. And so there was a lot of that. I could not leave my office without being, approached about something. People would come up to me, and instead of just saying, hey, how are you? Or I would sing in a benefit, and I would come off stage and they would be like, did you get my email about my dates? You know, it was just constant. And then at the Metropolitan Room, because I think you probably remember, we did the postcards with people's pictures and stuff. And God forbid if somebody's picture didn't get put on there, then it was my fault if they didn't. There was just a lot of pressure and a lot of things that were out of my control that I took the heat for. And, you know, at the Metropolitan Room, there was an issue with people getting paid. And I had nothing to do with that. But who was the face of the Metropolitan Room? So I was the one that got called, you know, and I wasn't getting paid, you know. So it was a weird thing. Sydney said, I'll never forget, Sydney said, everybody thinks that you're shopping at Bergdorf Goodman every day. And I was like, well, that is not the truth.
That sounds like him. I want to, you know, before we move on to Singnasium, how many years did you serve as the president of MAC?
11 years as the president, and then I was vice president for like four or 5 years before that, and then I was on the board for maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years before that. So it's been about 20 something years with MAC all told.
What was the ultimate decision for you now to move on? Was it because of Singnasium and the work that you're doing with that?
That was partially it. Part of it for me was that just I was done. I felt like, you know, I became the president of MAC in a really crazy time. There was a treasurer that had been embezzling money. And the second I became the president, it all fell into my lap. And I spent a year dealing with that mess. And then there was some other things that were going on. And so then they were in debt. There was a lot of debt and a lot of this. And now none of that is the case anymore. And so we fixed it. And I always give credit to Sue Matsuki. If Sue Matsuki wouldn't have been on that board, she and I kind of rebuilt MAC. And if she would not have been on the board, I don't know that any of this would have happened. Because she's got the money brain, you know, and the numbers. And she was able to reconstruct all of this stuff and put all of this stuff back together. And so the two of us spent a lot of time dealing with lawyers, the FBI, the New York State District Attorney. It was crazy. But that was just the beginning of it. But, you know, I'd done it for 11 years. You know, I created the MAC open mics. I created They Write the Songs. I created the MAC to School. All of that stuff was stuff that I came up with. And now everybody else is doing it. And I'm like, well, I need to start putting that into my own life, which is Singnasium. I felt that I gave what I wanted to give, and which was a lot. And I felt like it was just time for new people to take the reins. I'm still very much involved. I'm on the advisory board. As a matter of fact, I have a MAC board meeting right after we finish. So I'm still involved in all of that. But I felt like I had done my time, and I wanted to move on and let somebody else get some fresh ideas. And, you know, because I brought a lot of fresh ideas in, and now I'm not so fresh anymore. So let's somebody else who can bring some fresh insight, which is Amy Wolk, who's the new president, you know. So, and she and I talk all the time, and I didn't just want to stomp away, you know, because I love the organization and I love the people that are on the board, and I worked really hard to help the organization get to where it is. And so I didn't just want to, you know, many presidents in the past have just been like, I'm done. And then you never see them anymore. And I'm like,
that's true.
I said, that's not me. That's not what I want to do. And so I still want to be involved. I just don't want to be in charge, you know, because I'm in charge of Singnasium, you know, and that's where my passion and my career is.
So we're going to talk about Singnasium in a moment, but hold up your CD. We're going to do product placement here. So here's a dinosaur named Harry, written and illustrated by Brian Norber, who is also from St. Louis.
Wow.
Yes. Do you know Brian?
I don't.
Yes, great actor. But this book, I love this book. And we're going to give that away, and we're going to give away your CD. One lucky person is going to get both of these. But in order to be eligible, and I'm going to bring this up and show how this is going to work, you have to put in the subject line, hashtag Lennie Watts. If you've already done it, don't do it again, because it will not increase your chances to win. But in a few moments, we're going to do a drawing, and you're going to see how this is all going to work. But before we get there, tell us about Singnasium.
Singnasium came about, you know, I had been teaching for years. And Singnasium came about when John Kaprowski, who sadly is no longer with us, and Kim Grog came to me independently and just said, you know, at this point in your life, you should try to see if you can do something with your teaching that's a little bigger than just what you're doing. And then that's how Singnasium kind of came about. I was like, well, if 2 people think I should do this, then maybe I should, maybe I should do it, And so that's how it started. And then we started having meetings, and we registered with the Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts, and they gave us all the stuff and they helped us, and we got picked by a law firm pretty quickly, and they did all of our paperwork and everything for us gratis.
Wonderful.
To become a nonprofit. We decided we wanted to become a nonprofit because ultimately I want to do more than just teach classes, which I'll talk about in a second, but that's where it started. And because I know everybody, I was able to get really, aside from myself, I was able to really tap into some of these great teaching artists. Gabrielle Stravelli was with us, has been with us from the beginning, and Christine Zbornik. Our voice teacher is Carmen Cancel, who people love. We've had Karen Mason, we've had Sharon McKnight, we've had just like a Michael Kilgore, we've had all kinds of people teaching for us. Farrah Alvin teaches for us now, and so we've had a really great. We even JP Perot actually taught a class on French, like people who want to sing in French and actually sing correct the right words, and so we've tried to do different classes and different things, and that's how it all and it's just grown. And to be honest with you, this whole pandemic thing has kind of been good for us in a way, because we took everything online and we expanded our footprint. We had a student from Tasmania. We have students. I see Mary Zev on there. I see people from, that don't live in New York City that were able to take classes in Florida, California. We've had people from England. I had Barb Younger teaching from England,
Yes.
So we were really able to kind of expand our footprint. And then we started doing virtual open mics because people really wanted to have that community. And so we were doing that. I just stopped doing them at the end of the year because when everybody started living their lives again, they didn't want to sit inside and sing. But I think now we're going to start doing them again periodically so people can come on and sing. And we have people from all over the country that come on and do these open mics with us. We also started doing outreach. Michael Holland and I went and did an after-school program at a school called Brooklyn Jesuit Prep in Crown Heights. And we did an after-school program that, well, it started out to be just what I call my Sing Your Story class, but none of them wanted to sing. These 5 girls, like they had no idea what they were getting into, but they didn't want to sing in front of each other and they were nervous. So what it ended up being, I really quickly switched it to them writing their own songs. So I worked with them on the lyrics and Michael worked with them on the melody. And we had songs from, one little girl wrote this really funny song about riding her bicycle, all the way up to another girl who wrote about the day she found out her father had been murdered in Mexico.
Oh my God. Wow.
I mean, it was like, and they wrote these songs. And so for me, that's where I would like to see Singnasium go more into the outreach. We're going to have hospital programs. I want to do a prison program for people who are incarcerated. I'm like, who has a better story to tell than people who are incarcerated? Wow. And if we can do it through music, that's where we are headed, along with the classes and everything. But it just started by me teaching my little classes in the back room at Don't Tell Mama. That's where it started. And when I first started teaching, I did it with Jay Rogers because I was afraid that people wouldn't want to take a class with just me because they didn't know me. So Jay Rogers and I team taught a class together at Mama's. And that's how my teaching started. It's just, I'm the poster child for, if you want something to happen, you got to make it happen yourself. I don't get the phone calls. I got this one to be celebrated, but I don't get the phone calls. I don't get that kind of stuff. Anything that I've done to any success, I have created because I had to. And so I'm a big, pusher of get out there and create your own world and your own life, because if you sit around waiting for somebody, I mean, look at what you've done, Richard. Come on. I mean, you do the same thing. You've created this whole thing, this celebrate. I mean, this came out of you from the beginning. So, You know, I'm a big proponent of that. I think that is the only way to get, and I think the best things come out of that, as opposed to just getting the phone call to do some kind of generic bullshit.
I agree.
Celebratory French.
No, it's okay. So again, you know, there are a lot of people watching, but I only see 7 people who have put in the hashtag. So hashtag Lennie Watts. My homage to James Lipton inside the Actors Studio. I've got some questions, and at the end of these questions, we're going to do our drawing. So the first question is, what do you think what do you most look forward to, since we both are right on the beginnings of 60? What do you look forward to about getting older, and what are things that you're concerned about getting older?
Well, the things I look forward to are being able to do what I want without giving a shit about what anybody thinks. I think that is a big thing. It's just like I've been there, I've done that, I've earned the respect, I've earned the life that I have, and I don't want to have to answer to people. And I feel like now I can do that. One of the regrets is that, you know, there are more days behind me than ahead of me, you know, so there's always that. But listen, so many people I know are so vibrant in their 70s. That's the great thing about cabaret is there's no shelf life or no time limit on it. And I know people that are rocking it in their 70s. So that gives me some hope for that. But yeah, that's it. The idea of turning 60 and being able to just kind of really be unapologetically who I am, it's taken me this long to get here without worrying about what people think. Amen.
And if there's nothing else that I've learned, our dear friend Peggy Eason, who God bless you, directed her towards a MAC nomination, I might add. But we spoke the night before she passed away. And the last thing I said to her, she said, "I love you." And I said, "I love you more." And then the next day, she's gone. So don't wait, anyone. Get out there and do what makes you happy. Live your passion.
I tell people all the time when they're saying something, I'm like, well, if not now, when? When are you going to do it? What are you waiting for? You know, that's it. If not now, when?
Well, that brings me into my next question for you. What makes you happy?
Disney. I love Disney World. I don't know why. I can't explain why, but I love it. I'm the happiest when I'm there. And then second to that is standing in the back of a room watching someone that I've helped create something with have a successful hour on stage. There's nothing. It actually makes me happier than performing myself. Watching somebody else do what we've worked on, that they've worked on so hard, and watching them achieve what they've always dreamt of doing. And that really makes me happy.
That's wonderful. Who is the person most similar to you in this business?
Oh, in this business? God, I don't know. I don't know who's similar.
Maybe to there isn't anyone.
I don't think there is. And that's the cool thing about cabaret is that we're all so different. You know, I'd like to think that it's Marilyn May, but I don't know that that's true. I can't kick as high as she does. You know, I don't know who's the most similar to me.
Oh, I love that. Now, if you were to open your cabinet of curiosities, what would we find there?
You would. I tell people all the time that my apartment is, if you just came into my apartment, you would think a 9-year-old girl lived here. So I've got all my Disney stuff. When I was in Disney, I built a droid. I'm not even a Star Wars fan, but I have a droid. I have, you know, I have little tiny hands that I like to play with. I have, you know, I think that's what keeps me young, is that kind of stuff. And I think I hope that's what you were talking about.
Yes,
with the curiosity.
Exactly what I'm talking about.
But yeah, I think it's just I love a gadget. Like right here is this wipe. What do you call it? Hand sanitizer mister that you put your hand over and it mists your hand because squeezing that bottle was just too much for me, I guess. So I love a gadget. I don't know how to use 98% of them, but I love them.
Wonderful. Now, do you believe in visualizations?
Yeah, I do believe in visualizations. I think that's been very helpful to me, and I do it actually unconsciously. Like at night, sometimes before I'm falling asleep, I will visualize where I want things to go. I'm trying to visualize. I'm doing a new show in March, and I'm trying to visualize the lyrics. That's not going as well as some of the other things. But I do believe in visualizing. I think you can, again, it goes back to what we were talking about. You can manifest whatever you want to manifest. And I think visualizing it and knowing what that is a big part of that. That's
great. When have you been most humbled in your career?
In my career? Well, it was the show that you and I did together. The Little Rhodey's Big Burlesque. And I was bumped up. I was the top banana, and I was not, and the director, Richard Spellico, thought after the first preview that I deserved the last bow, that I wasn't getting the last bow. And he switched the bows, and I thought that was like the most amazing thing. And then the night that my parents came, I came out, the audience jumped to their feet, except for two people sitting in the audience, which were my mom and dad, who did not stand up because they felt like it was like, they were like, oh, we didn't want to be like we were bragging or proud. And I was like, and so in the cabaret that night, I'm like, everybody stood up but you. So my family keeps me very humble. Like they keep me, they keep it all in check.
And this, I mean, I love the story that you told about, was it your father after my performance that night? Do you remember
which one? No, which one?
About thinking that Judy Garland had come in to perform or something. Was it your father?
Oh no, but that story sounds familiar. But it wasn't my dad, but
no, but somebody thought that they had brought Judy Garland back.
I remember that story. I do remember that story.
Yes. And I probably know the answer to this, but what do you think is the most single beautiful site that you've ever visited?
The single most beautiful site. I have to tell you, 2 years ago, I went to Ireland, and just the entire place was the most beautiful. It was. Have you ever been to Ireland?
No.
We were in the Ring of Kerry, and everything is green and beautiful, and there's castles, like remains of, and I had never seen anything like that before. And to me, that was like the single most beautiful thing, was just looking out into this beautiful, green, serene, peaceful, almost like from another time. That you don't get here. Like in America, that castle would have been turned into an Arby's, you know? And so they still had the remains of all, and that to me was like breathtaking, just looking over all that stuff.
Okay. When was your life most out of control in this business?
In this business or just in general?
In this business.
I think my life was most out of control. This might get me in trouble, but I'm going to say it. When I was working at the Metropolitan Room, I was so unhappy and so miserable, and I had gained back like all this weight, and I didn't feel I was depressed. I also had bed bugs at the time. It was like all of this stuff was hitting at the same time that was kind of telling me that it was time to move on. And that's when I think I felt most out of control, because I had no control. And so I was just grasping at weird stuff to try to get me through it.
Wow. Well, thanks for being honest about that.
Yeah. With the illusion of everything, of shopping at Bergdorf Goodman.
Yeah. And this is your last chance to put in hashtag Lennie Watts, because we're going to do the drawing after this question. And this is the last question I'm going to ask you. When were you the strongest that you've ever had to be in this business?
In this business, I think right now I feel like I'm the strongest. I'm making decisions that are right for me. I'm doing a whole different kind of show. Just as a little plug, in March, I'm doing a show with Michael Holland, and I'm not using a piano. It's just two guitars and an upright bass. It's all new music. It's a different kind of music, and I feel like I don't know that I would have done that before, because I had my safety net of what I did, which some people saw as brave, but that was my safety net in there. But now this is a whole new kind of a thing for me. And I kind of feel I'm the strongest now. I'm making decisions about, you know, other people's art, you know, with Singnasium, and I'm supporting a lot of other people and trying to keep my own creativity going. So I feel like this is kind of the strongest that I've ever been in this, in the business.
That's great. Well, we're going to do the drawing now. I'm going to show you how this works. This is a lot of fun. So here we go.
Oh my God, look at that.
Mm-hmm. And we'll see who the winner is. Lisa Dennett. Do you know Lisa, don't you?
I do know Lisa.
Yes. Congratulations, Lisa.
I can hand deliver her that CD very soon.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. You're going to be able to hand it to her. And Lisa, make sure that I have your address so that Brian is going to send you an autographed copy of the book. So I'm going to remove this. Lennie, I'm actually going to give my closing remarks, so don't go anywhere for a moment. I want to thank everybody who showed up tonight. I know that I can speak for Lennie when I say this. When any of you show up for any of us in this business, we don't take it lightly. So thank you for being here. And I hope that if this was your first time here, that it will not be your last time. There's a button on richardskippercelebrates.com that says join in the celebration. I'm all about celebrating artists and their body of worth. Click on that button. Check out the other artists that I have celebrated and the others that are coming up in the future. And we've got a lot of big surprises coming up. So do that. I also end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. There's a new website called whatyoumeantome.com. What you mean, the number 2, me.com. And I would like all of you to go to that site. And then I want you to go to Facebook, and I want you to reach out to the first name that pops up on your friends list. And I want you to go to that site, and I want you to fill out that form. And I want you to send it to that person and let them know what they mean in your life. Because we don't have tomorrow promised to us, this is it. The lessons that we've learned from Lennie tonight is that if you have a dream, go after it. Be decisive. Go after those dreams. And I always say, as my dear friend David Friedman always says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. And I always say, if you're going to go out in a boat, make sure you bring a skipper along. Now, I'm going to leave the screen, Lennie, and I'm going to give you the final word. Anything that you want to expound upon that we talked about tonight, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any message that you want to put out to anyone who's watching right now, thank you for being here. I so appreciate you. And I appreciate all that you've done for our community and the gifts that you've given to the world and that you're going to continue to give. Thank you and happy belated birthday. Lennie,
thank you.
You've got the final word.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate you, and I will sell the picture of Richard in a half slip to anybody, to the highest bidder. Listen, I'm just going to repeat what I said before, which is if you've got something that you want to do, just do it. Reach out to the people that can help you, make it happen. You know, I'm kind of a little bit of a loss for words here, but that's really all I have to say. Make it happen. Make it happen yourself. Don't wait for somebody else, and don't wait for somebody else's approval to do anything, because you will be waiting for a very, very, very long time. I wish you all the best. And thank you so much, Richard, for having me on. It's been a lot of fun.